The night was unusually still, almost suffocating in its silence. As I sat on the couch nursing a scotch I wasn't in the mood to drink, the muted hum of the television filled the living room, its flickering glow casting strange shadows on the walls. Emma had said she'd be out late with friends, again. It was becoming her mantra these past few months. Just a girls' night, she chirped as she breezed out the door earlier. A shimmering black dress hugging her figure, her laughter like a dagger in my chest. She didn't laugh like that with me anymore. The clock struck 2 a.m. I should have been in bed, but something kept me tethered to the couch, an inexplicable gnawing in my gut. That's when I heard it, the rattle of keys at the door. My heart sank. She wasn't alone. The door swung open, slamming against the wall, and there she was, stumbling in on unsteady legs, her laughter loud and slurred. Behind her, a man followed, tall and muscular, his shirt half unbuttoned, reeking of alcohol and arrogance. "Shoo!" she giggled, failing miserably at suppressing her voice. "My husband might be sleeping." I froze, disbelief rooting me to the couch as her words echoed in my head. My husband might be sleeping. Emma, my voice, sharper than I intended, cut through the room. Her head whipped around, her eyes wide and glassy, mascara smudged and lips stained red from too much wine. For a moment, she looked like a stranger. Oh shit," she stammered, trying to steady herself against the doorframe. "Lucas, what are you doing up? What the hell is this?" I rose slowly, the scotch glass still in my hand, its weight suddenly unbearable. The man behind her, her companion, had the audacity to smirk, his eyes sweeping over me like I was the intruder. "Hey man, sorry, didn't know she had company." Company. Emma stumbled toward me, her hands outstretched as if she could somehow smooth over the insanity unraveling in front of me. "Baby, it's not what it looks like." I was just, "Not what it looks like?" I barked, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "You come home drunk, with another man, and it's not what it looks like?" Her laughter shifted, turning shrill and defensive. "Oh, come on, Lucas. You're overreacting. We were just having some fun. Right, Greg?" She shot a look back at him, her expression daring him to deny it. "Yeah," he drawled, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Just fun. Fun." That word shattered something inside me. I stood there, staring at Emma as though I could will her to explain the unexplainable. My mind raced to fill in the blanks. Where had she been? And why did she seem so utterly shameless? Emma swayed slightly, her glossy eyes darting from me to Greg, as if she were trying to gauge which one of us she should appease first. "Lucas, listen," she started, her words tumbling out with the precision of a drunk trying to sound sober. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I laughed, an ugly, bitter sound that echoed off the walls. "Blowing this out of proportion? You bring him here?" I jabbed a finger toward Greg. "To our house at this hour and I'm the one overreacting." Greg, clearly uncomfortable but too arrogant to leave, shrugged and offered a half-smile. "Look man, if it's a problem, I can." "Shut the hell up," I snapped, cutting him off. My chest heaved with barely contained rage as I turned back to Emma. "I want an explanation. Now." She laughed nervously, brushing her hair back as if that would make this less surreal. Okay, she said, holding her hands up in mock surrender. "Fine. We had a few drinks, we danced, and She hesitated, a flicker of guilt finally crossing her face before she quickly masked it. "It got a little out of hand. But hey, no harm, right?"
No harm.
My voice cracked with disbelief. "You call this no harm?" And then she said it, the words that would haunt me long after the dust had settled. "Lucas, calm down," she slurred, a twisted grin spreading across her face. "Look, if it's really such a big deal, why don't you just join us?" Time seemed to freeze. I stared at her, waiting for some sign that this was a drunken joke. But there was no punchline. Greg raised an eyebrow, glancing between us like he'd just stumbled into the world's most awkward game show. Emma, maybe we should just..." "Shut up, Greg," she snapped, turning on him before looking back at me with that same wicked grin. Come on, Lucas. Don't act so prudish. It's just one night. Who knows? Maybe it'll even help us. Help us. I could feel the blood roaring in my ears, my body trembling with a combination of fury and humiliation. You're unbelievable, I whispered, my voice raw. You think this asterisk is something I'd ever agree to? Emma's smirk faltered for a moment, and she reached for my arm. Lucas, please. You're being so dramatic. I yanked my arm away, the force making her stumble. Don't touch me, I growled. You don't get to touch me. The weight of her actions seemed to finally hit her as her face crumbled into something resembling shame. I didn't mean it like that, she mumbled, her voice trembling. But it was too late. The damage was done, and I was already walking away. Where are you going? She called after me, panic creeping into her tone. To get some air, I said coldly, grabbing my jacket from the back of the couch. I turned to Greg, who had the sense to look uncomfortable now. You. Now. He didn't argue, slipping past Emma and out the door without another word. She reached for me again, her tears starting to flow. Lucas, wait. Please, just talk to me. But I was already stepping outside, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. The silence of the empty street was a sharp contrast to the chaos inside, but it wasn't enough to calm the storm raging in my chest. I stood on the porch, gripping the railing as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. The cool night air burned in my lungs, but it was nothing compared to the inferno inside me. My mind replayed the scene over and over. Emma stumbling in, Greg smirking like he owned the place, and then that offer. Join us? I muttered bitterly under my breath, the words leaving a sour taste in my mouth. The sheer audacity of it all. The door creaked open behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was her. Lucas. Emma's voice wavered, soft and trembling. Please, can we just talk? I didn't answer right away, my fingers digging into the wood of the railing. When I finally turned, her mascara was smeared down her cheeks, her eyes bloodshot and desperate. What is there to talk about? I said coldly. You brought another man into our house. You humiliated me, Emma, and then you had the audacity to suggest that. Her lower lip quivered as she stepped closer. I wasn't thinking straight. I had too much to drink. Don't. I cut her off, my voice rising. Don't you dare blame this on the alcohol. You didn't just accidentally invite him back here. You made a choice. Tears streamed down her face as she wrapped her arms around herself. I know I messed up, okay? I know I hurt you, but it wasn't because I don't love you, Lucas. I swear I love you. You just what? I barked, the words spilling out before I could stop them. What excuse could possibly justify this? Her silence stretched, the weight of it crushing. I don't know how to say this, she whispered, her voice cracking. But I was frustrated. You've been so closed off lately, Lucas, so distracted. And I started feeling invisible. And then, in bed, my chest tightened, and I stared at her, waiting. I felt like you didn't want me anymore, she said, her tears flowing freely now. Like I wasn't enough. And Greg, he said things, stupid things. He made me feel seen, Lucas. He made me feel wanted in a way I've missed for so long. You cheated on me because you're unhappy with our sex life? My voice was eerily calm, but I could feel the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she sobbed. I didn't. I just wanted, I don't know. I wanted to feel that spark again. But it didn't mean anything. It was stupid, reckless, and I hate myself for it. I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound that even startled me. Not good enough for you in bed, huh? That's what this boils down to? Instead of talking to me, working through it like a grown woman, you went out and let someone else make you feel wanted. Her face crumpled as she stepped closer. I didn't do it because I don't love you, Lucas. I do. I love you more than anything. I missed you. The way you used to look at me, the way we used to be. And I made a terrible, terrible mistake trying to fill that void. Please, you have to believe me. I turned away, my hands gripping the railing so tightly my knuckles went white. Her words burned, but the worst part was the flicker of truth in them. Things had changed between us. I'd buried myself in work, grown complacent. I'd let the passion slip. But none of that justified what she did. "This is on you, Emma," I said, my voice low. "You could have told me. You could have fought for us. But instead, you threw it all away." She collapsed onto the porch, her sobs breaking through her words. "I'm so sorry, Lucas. I swear it didn't mean anything. I hate myself for what I've done." I turned to face her, my expression hard. "You should hate yourself," I said bluntly, "because I sure as hell can't look at you the same way anymore." Her knees buckled as she reached for me, but I stepped back. "Lucas, please. I'll do anything. Just tell me how to fix this." I stared at her for a long moment, my anger warring with the heartbreak threatening to consume me. Finally, I spoke. "Go inside, Emma." "What?" she choked out, looking up at me with wide, tear-streaked eyes. "Go inside," I repeated, my voice firmer. "I need to think. Alone." She hesitated, her hand hovering as if she wanted to reach for me one last time. But the look in my eyes must have told her it was pointless. She rose shakily to her feet and disappeared back into the house, leaving me alone with the unbearable weight of what had just happened. The house was silent when I finally stepped back inside. It was the kind of silence that presses down on you, heavy and suffocating, until you feel like you might choke on it. I could hear Emma upstairs, her quiet sobs muffled through the closed door of our bedroom. Part of me wanted to storm up there and demand answers. Real answers, not the drunken excuses she'd given on the porch. But another part of me couldn't bear to see her face. I dropped onto the couch, the scotch still sitting on the coffee table where I'd left it. I picked up the glass, swirling the amber liquid as if it might offer some kind of clarity. But all I found was the same raw, festering pain that had been gnawing at me since the moment she walked through the door with him. Greg. His face flashed in my mind, smug and self-assured, like he thought he'd won some kind of prize. And maybe he had. After all, Emma had chosen him, hadn't she? Chosen his arms over mine, his words over mine, his touch over mine. I slammed the glass down so hard the liquid splashed onto my hand. How did we get here? I thought bitterly. Was this all my fault? Had I been so blind to her needs, so wrapped up in my own world, that I'd pushed her into the arms of another man? No. The thought hit me like a lightning bolt. I wasn't perfect. God knows I wasn't. But this wasn't my fault. She could have talked to me, fought for us, told me how she was feeling before it ever came to this. But instead, she chose to betray me, to break the vows we made to each other. The sound of footsteps on the stairs pulled me from my thoughts. Emma appeared in the doorway, her face pale and tear-streaked. She changed out of the dress she wore to the club and into one of my old t-shirts, as if wearing something of mine might somehow bridge the chasm she'd created between us. "Lucas," she began softly, her voice hoarse. "Can we talk? Please." I didn't respond right away, my eyes fixed on the stain the scotch had left on my hand. When I finally looked up at her, my expression must have said it all, because she flinched. "I don't even know where to start," I said finally, my voice devoid of emotion. "Then let me start," she said, stepping closer. Her hands trembled as she clasped them together, like a child about to confess to breaking a vase. "I know I've hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But you have to believe me when I say it wasn't because I don't love you." "Do I?" I said coldly, my gaze piercing. "Because right now it feels like everything we've built was a lie." She sank onto the armchair across from me, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her own guilt. "It wasn't a lie," she whispered. "I swear, Lucas, I love you. I've always loved you. I lost sight of that for a moment. I let my insecurities, my loneliness, get the better of me. And Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. "I hate myself for it." I leaned back, crossing my arms as I studied her. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I asked, my voice laced with quiet fury. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to see you with him? In our house? I know, she sobbed, her words muffled by her hands. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it. But Lucas, I'm begging you. Don't let this be the end of us. We can fix this. We can get through this. I laughed bitterly. Fix this? How, Emma? You think a few counseling sessions are going to erase the image of you walking through that door with him? Her sobs grew louder, and for a moment, I almost felt a pang of sympathy. Almost. I'll do anything, she choked out. I'll quit drinking. I'll quit going out. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I still love you. I shook my head, my chest tightening as I tried to keep the anger from boiling over. It's not about what you'll quit, Emma. It's about the fact that you didn't value me enough to stop yourself before it got to this point. And now I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again. Her eyes widened, the realization of my words sinking in. Lucas, no, she whispered. Please don't say that. But I'd already made up my mind. I need space, I said firmly, rising to my feet. I need time to figure out what I want. Because right now, Emma, I don't see a future where this ends with us together. Her face crumpled, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said quietly. Just don't. And with that, I walked past her, heading toward the guest room, where I locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the bed. For the first time since this nightmare began, I let myself cry. The morning light crept through the blinds, cutting across the guest room like jagged shards of glass. I hadn't slept. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, the events of the night before played out in agonizing detail, each moment twisting the knife a little deeper. Emma's voice, her tears, her desperate pleas, they all felt like a distant echo now. The woman I'd loved, trusted, and built my life around had shattered something inside me. Something I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. I finally forced myself out of bed, my body heavy with exhaustion and my mind clouded with anger. The house was quiet as I stepped into the hallway, but I knew she was still here. I could feel her presence like a weight pressing down on me. When I walked into the kitchen, there she was, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked up as I entered, her eyes puffy and red, her face pale. She didn't say anything at first, and neither did I. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the silence between us thick and suffocating. Finally, she broke it. Lucas, she said softly, her voice fragile. Can we talk? I didn't answer right away, taking a long sip of my coffee as I stared out the window. The sun was shining, the world oblivious to the storm raging inside our house. What is there left to say, Emma? I asked finally, my voice devoid of emotion. She flinched at the coldness in my tone but pressed on. I know you're angry. Angry? I interrupted, turning to face her. Emma, angry doesn't even begin to cover it.
I'm hurt. I'm humiliated. I'm disgusted.
And I can't stop asking myself one question. Why? Why would you do this to me? She set the coffee cup down, her hands trembling. I've been trying to figure that out myself, she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes again. I was lonely, Lucas. I felt like I was invisible to you. Like you didn't see me anymore. I didn't see you? I repeated, my voice rising. Emma, I've been here every single day. I've worked my ass off to provide for us, to give us the life we always dreamed of. How is that not enough? She shook her head, the tears spilling over. It's not about money, Lucas. It's about connection. It's about feeling wanted, feeling seen. And somewhere along the way, we lost that. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I never stopped loving you. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow in the quiet kitchen. You have a funny way of showing it. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But Lucas, please, don't throw everything we've built away because of one stupid, drunken night. Her words cut deep, but they didn't have the effect she was hoping for. You think this is about one night? I asked, leaning forward, my voice low and sharp. This isn't just about what you did, Emma. It's about the fact that you made a choice, a selfish, thoughtless choice that you knew would destroy us. And now, you're asking me to just move on like it never happened. She sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. I'll do anything, Lucas. I swear. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. Just tell me how to fix this. I stared at her, my heart aching despite my anger. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that we could somehow salvage what was left of us. But the image of her with Greg, the sound of her laughter as they stumbled into our home, was seared into my mind like a brand. I don't know if this can be fixed, I said finally, my voice heavy with resignation. And I don't know if I want to fix it. Her head shot up, panic flashing in her eyes. No, she said, shaking her head. No, Lucas, please. Don't say that. Don't give up on us. I didn't give up on us, Emma, I said coldly. You did. Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not this time. I need time, I said, my voice firm. Time to figure out what I want. And right now, I think the best thing for both of us is for you to leave. She froze, her eyes wide with shock. Leave? Yes, I said, standing tall. You need to go. I can't think clearly with you here, and I need space. If you care about me at all, you'll give me that. But where will I go? She asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, I said bluntly. A friend's house, a hotel, anywhere but here. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at me like I just ripped her heart out. Finally, she nodded, her movements slow and shaky. Okay, she whispered. I'll go. She stood, her shoulders slumped, and disappeared upstairs to pack a bag. I didn't follow her. Couldn't. When she finally walked out the door, her suitcase dragging behind her, I felt a strange mixture of relief and grief. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The door clicked shut behind Emma, leaving the house in an unbearable quiet. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the empty space where she had been. A part of me expected her to walk back in, to plead one last time, to say something, anything, that would make sense of what had just happened. But she didn't. I sat down on the couch, staring at the scotch on the table. I reached for it, then stopped, my hand hovering above the glass. Drinking wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't numb the pain or stop the endless loop of questions in my head. So I stood up and poured it down the sink instead. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I wandered aimlessly through the house, my eyes catching on the remnants of a life we'd built together. The framed photos on the walls, the small knickknacks she'd insisted on buying, the throw blanket she loved to curl up with on the couch. Everything reminded me of her. I ended up in our bedroom, standing in the doorway like a stranger in my own home. The bed was unmade, the sheets rumpled from where she'd slept the night before. The scent of her perfume lingered in the air, a cruel reminder of the intimacy we'd shared. I wanted to scream, to break something, to rip every trace of her from the house. But instead, I sank to the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, and let the weight of it all crash down on me. How had it come to this? I thought about the night we met, the way her smile had lit up the room. I thought about our wedding day, the vows we'd made, the promises we'd sworn to keep. And I thought about all the little moments in between, the laughter, the arguments, the quiet nights spent in each other's arms. Had it all been a lie? My phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me from my thoughts. I reached for it, half hoping it was Emma, even though I knew I wouldn't answer if it was. But the name on the screen wasn't hers, it was my brother, Dan. Hey, I said, my voice hoarse. Lucas. Dan's voice was steady, a lifeline in the chaos. How are you holding up? I didn't know how he knew something was wrong. But Dan had always had a way of sensing things. I'm not, I admitted, my voice breaking. What happened? He asked gently. I hesitated for a moment before the words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. I told him everything. Emma's betrayal, the scene with Greg, the way she tried to justify it. By the time I finished, my throat felt raw, and my chest felt hollow. Dan was quiet for a moment, letting my words settle. "Lucas," he said finally, his voice firm but kind, "you don't deserve this. You've given her everything, and she repaid you with betrayal. You need to focus on yourself now. Don't let her drag you down any further." "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. "You start by taking it one step at a time," he said. "But first you need to decide what you want. Do you think you can forgive her?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was I didn't know. Part of me wanted to believe that we could fix this, that the woman I fell in love with was still in there somewhere. But another part of me, an angrier, more cynical part, knew that things would never be the same. "I don't know," I said finally. "But I don't think so."
Dan siged.
"Then you need to make a plan. Talk to a lawyer, figure out your options. Don't let this fester, Lucas. It'll only hurt more in the long run." "I'll think about it," I said, even though I knew he was right. "Promise me you will," he pressed. "I promise," I said quietly. We talked for a little while longer, Dan offering his support and reminding me that I wasn't alone. By the time we hung up, I felt a little steadier, though the pain was still there, raw and unrelenting. I sat on the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror across the room. I looked like a man who had been through hell, and maybe I had, but I wasn't going to stay there. The following morning, I woke up to an unfamiliar quiet. No sound of Emma bustling around the kitchen. No hum of her voice singing along to the radio. Just silence. For a fleeting moment, I forgot everything. I sat up, expecting to find her sipping coffee at the table like any other day. But then reality came rushing back, hitting me with the force of a freight train. She was gone. I spent most of the day in a haze, alternating between bursts of anger and waves of crushing sadness. But as the hours ticked by, something inside me began to shift. Dan's words echoed in my mind. Asterisk, you need to make a plan. Don't let this fester. Asterisk. I couldn't let this destroy me. I owed myself more than that. By mid-afternoon, I found myself staring at my phone, scrolling through contacts until I landed on a name. Alan Marsh, attorney at law. He was an old friend of Dan's, a family law specialist who had helped a few people I knew. My thumb hovered over the call button for what felt like an eternity before I finally pressed it. Alan Marsh. His voice came through the line, professional and calm. "Alan, this is Lucas Graham," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Dan's brother." "Lucas," he said warmly, though his tone quickly turned serious. "Dan told me you might call. What's going on?" I hesitated for a moment, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. "I need to talk to someone about divorce," I said finally. There was a pause on the other end, but it wasn't judgmental, just understanding. "I'm sorry to hear that," Alan said gently. "Why don't you come by my office tomorrow? We'll sit down and you can tell me everything." "Sound good?" "Yeah," I said, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Thanks, Alan." After we hung up, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't that I wanted a divorce. Far from it. But I needed to understand my options, to regain some control over a life that had spiraled out of it. The rest of the day was a blur of small, hollow tasks. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, and even went for a run. Anything to distract myself. But no matter what I did, Emma was always there, a ghost haunting every corner of the house. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself sitting on the couch, flipping through photos on my phone, pictures of vacations, holidays, quiet moments we'd shared. I stopped on one from our anniversary last year. Emma smiling at me over a candlelit dinner, her eyes sparkling with happiness. I couldn't reconcile that woman with the one who had stumbled through the door with Greg. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway jolted me from my thoughts. My heart leapt into my throat, a part of me hoping it was her, coming back to say she'd made a mistake, that she'd do whatever it took to fix this. But it wasn't Emma. Dan stepped out of the car, a determined look on his face as he walked up to the porch. "I brought dinner," he said, holding up a takeout bag as he stepped inside. "You didn't have to do that," I said, though I was grateful. "Yeah, I did," he said firmly, setting the bag on the table. You're not going through this alone, Lucas. Not on my watch. We sat down together, eating in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Dan spoke. So, did you make the call? I nodded. I'm meeting with Alan tomorrow. Good, he said, his tone approving. That's the first step. I don't even know what I'm going to say, I admitted, pushing a piece of rice around my plate. Just tell him the truth, Dan said. He'll help you figure out the rest. After dinner, Dan stayed for a while, helping me sort through some of the chaos in my head. By the time he left, I felt a little steadier, like maybe, just maybe, I could get through this. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of what was to come pressing down on me. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of something else. Hope. The next day, I walked into Alan Marsh's office, clutching a folder filled with documents I thought he might need. Bank statements, tax returns, even copies of our marriage certificate. It felt surreal, like I was preparing for a battle I never imagined I'd have to fight. Alan greeted me with a firm handshake and a sympathetic smile. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and an air of calm authority that instantly put me at ease. Let's sit down, he said, gesturing to a small conference table. As we settled in, he opened a notebook and looked at me expectantly. Start from the beginning, he said. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about Emma's betrayal, about the scene with Greg, and about the broken pieces of my marriage I didn't know how to put back together. The words came tumbling out, raw and unfiltered, and by the time I finished, I felt like I'd been wrung dry. Alan listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Lucas, I'm sorry you're going through this, he said. Infidelity is one of the hardest things to process, and it's clear that you're carrying a lot of pain. But you've taken an important first step by coming here. What are my options? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Well, Alan began, New York is a no-fault divorce state, which means you don't have to prove infidelity to file. However, if her actions have impacted your finances, like spending joint money on her affair, we can bring that up during the proceedings. Could affect how assets are divided. I nodded, absorbing his words. And what about the house? Alan smiled faintly, as if he'd heard the question 100 times before. That depends on what you both agree to, but if you want to keep it, we'll fight for that. The key is documenting everything. Financial records, correspondence, anything that supports your case. As he spoke, I felt a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in days, I wasn't drowning in anger or despair. Instead, I felt focused, determined. Alan must have noticed the change because he leaned forward, his tone firm but encouraging. Lucas, this isn't just about ending a marriage. It's about protecting your future. You've been wronged, and it's my job to make sure you come out of this as whole as possible. Thank you, I said quietly. He handed me a list of tasks. Gathering more documents, making notes on specific incidents, and promised to stay in touch as we moved forward. When I left his office, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. I wasn't out of the woods yet, but I had a map now, a way forward. That evening, Emma called. Seeing her name on my phone sent a jolt through me, but I answered. Lucas, she began, her voice soft and hesitant. I just wanted to see how you're doing. I'm fine, I said curtly. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke again. I miss you. I hate what I've done, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I just wanted you to know that. Her words didn't sting like they had before. Instead, they felt hollow, like an echo of something that used to matter. I'm meeting with a lawyer, I said plainly. The line went silent for a beat, and then I heard her inhale sharply. I understand, she said, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry, Lucas. I didn't respond. I didn't have the energy. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of the living room, staring at nothing. For the first time, I realized that while Emma's remorse might be genuine, it didn't change what she'd done, or the fact that I couldn't unsee it. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming my life. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights. Alan had been clear about what needed to happen. Gather everything, document every detail, and prepare for the process ahead. It felt cold, clinical even, but I understood it was necessary. Meanwhile, Emma tried reaching out. Texts, calls, even a handwritten letter slipped under the front door. I ignored most of it. I couldn't trust her words, not after what she'd done. One evening, a knock at the door broke the silence. I opened it to find Emma standing there, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She was holding a small box, trembling as she extended it toward me. "What is this?" I asked, my tone flat. "It's everything," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Every card you ever gave me, every picture, every memory. I wanted you to see that it mattered, that we mattered." I hesitated but took the box, setting it on the console table inside. "Why are you really here, Emma?" Tears welled in her eyes as she clasped her hands together. "Lucas, I know I broke us. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you for one last chance. Let me fix this. Let me prove that I can be better, that we can be better." Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. I exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Emma, you keep saying you want to fix this, but do you understand what you've done? You didn't just cheat on me. You shattered the trust that was supposed to hold us together. And trust, it doesn't come back." She sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I know I ruined everything. But I love you, Lucas. I love you so much it hurts." I stared at her, searching for the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But all I saw was someone I no longer recognized, someone who had made choices that ripped us apart. "I loved you, Emma," I said quietly. "I gave you everything I had, and it wasn't enough. You chose to throw it away, and now you want me to pretend it never happened. I can't do that." Her face crumpled, and she stepped back, as if my words had physically struck her. "So that's it," she whispered. "I've started the divorce process," I said bluntly. "It's what's best for both of us." Her sobs grew louder, but I stood firm. This wasn't just about her betrayal, it was about my survival. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Emma," I said, my voice soft but resolute. "But it won't be with me." She nodded shakily, tears streaming down her face, and turned to leave. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the one I needed. The night after Emma left for good, the house felt emptier than ever. I wandered through the rooms, each one a reminder of the life we'd built together, and the betrayal that had burned it to the ground. I stopped in the living room, staring at the box Emma had brought. Inside were tokens of a love I couldn't reconcile with her actions. The anniversary cards, the photographs of vacations and quiet moments, the notes she'd left for me over the years. I sifted through them, each one sparking a memory, each one cutting a little deeper. One photo caught my eye. The two of us standing on a beach at sunset, her arms wrapped around me, her smile radiant. It was from our honeymoon. I stared at it, my chest tightening as the weight of it all came crashing down again. How had we gotten here? For so long, I had blamed myself. For not being enough, for not seeing the cracks forming, for not fixing things before they broke. But as I looked at that photo, I realized something important. It wasn't all on me. Emma had made a choice to betray the trust we'd built, to step outside our marriage instead of fighting for it. And no matter how much I had loved her, I couldn't carry the weight of her decisions. The realization hit me like a wave. I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't undo the pain or rewrite the past. But I could choose how to move forward. I grabbed the box and carried it out to the garage. Setting it down on the floor, I found a lighter and struck the flame. For a moment, I hesitated, the flickering light illuminating the memories inside. Then, with a steady hand, I set the corner of one of the cards alight. The flames spread quickly, consuming the contents of the box as I watched. It wasn't just the photos or the cards that burned. It was the guilt, the shame, the endless questions of what if and why. When the fire finally died out, I stood there in the silence, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. This was the turning point. It was time to let go. It's been 6 months since that night. 6 months since I stood in the garage and watched the memories of a broken marriage go up in flames. I won't lie and say it's been easy. Healing never is. There were days when the pain felt unbearable, when the weight of betrayal threatened to crush me. Nights when I lay awake, haunted by the echoes of what could have been. But slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild. Therapy helped. Talking to someone who didn't know Emma, who didn't try to justify or condemn her actions, gave me clarity. I learned to recognize my own worth, to stop carrying the blame for her choices. And with that clarity came something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. I've started focusing on myself in ways I hadn't before. I took up running again, pushing my body to its limits and finding solace in the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. I reconnected with old friends, the kind of people who remind you of who you are when you feel lost. I even started volunteering at a local youth center, teaching kids the basics of carpentry, a skill my dad passed down to me. Seeing their faces light up when they create something with their own hands has been more rewarding than I ever imagined. As for Emma, she signed the divorce papers without a fight. We've spoken a few times since, but the conversations are brief and cordial, devoid of the raw emotion they once held. I think she's trying to move on too, in her own way. I won't deny that a part of me still aches when I think about her. You don't spend years building a life with someone without leaving pieces of yourself behind. But I've come to accept that some chapters aren't meant to have happy endings. And that's okay, because this isn't the end of my story. It's the beginning of a new one. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that pain doesn't define you. Tests you, shapes you, and ultimately reveals the strength you didn't know you had. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: I'm stronger now. Stronger than I ever thought I could be. And for the first time in a long time, I'm ready to face whatever comes next.